Welcome to Beat 'em Up City. It is a dark and stormy night, and what better time to talk about a horror-themed beat 'em up. So not only is it raining out right now, and you may be getting a little bit of that rain sound on the recording, but also I've come down with a cold and a cough, so my voice may not be at its best. I do apologize for that. But anyway, without further ado, let's move on and talk about Night Slashers. The 90s were absolutely part of the arcade era, and beat 'em ups were one of the most popular genres of the time. These quarter-munching games usually consisted of walking around a 2.5-dimensional space and pressing one or two buttons over and over again until you either defeated the end boss or ran out of quarters. Typically, beat 'em ups would pit one or more players against an army of thugs, gangsters, and martial arts tropes, with standout titles being few and far between. Here on Beat 'em Up City, we like to take a look at games that are a little off the beaten path, which brings us to today's featured game, Night Slashers. This beat 'em up replaces your standard street thugs with an army of zombies, teen wolves, Terminators, Jasons, Ultimate Warriors, and vampires. It's all packaged in a campy style with gore galore, my goodness. Night Slashers was released in 1993 by Data East, one of Japan's most prolific arcade game publishers. From 1978 until 2003, Data East created a number of famous games, including Burger Time, Karate Champ, Bad Dudes, Joe and Mac, so many more than I can count or name here. Night Slashers uses the Data East ARM6 hardware, which has a 32-bit ARM6 CPU, and that's the same hardware that was used for Captain America and the Avengers, Fighter's History, and a few other titles. This game was released in Japan, Korea, and North America, but it also has an overseas cabinet, which was used in other regions. It can be configured for 2 or 3 players, but I've only seen photos of 2-player cabinets. I looked all over the internet, I scoured the web, I couldn't find any photos of a 3-player cabinet, and I've never seen a 3-player Night Slashers cabinet in day-to-day life either. So, although the game could be configured for 3 players, I don't know if there actually was a 3-player cabinet. While all versions of the game are virtually identical, the North America and overseas cabinets both have this really unique feature called soft violence. In this mode, most of the blood is removed from the game, and a lot of the guts and viscera that come out when you're fighting zombies is turned green instead of red. Now, in all the versions, though, there are typical dip settings that you can manipulate, like difficulty, number of lives, and how the coin slots work, whether it's 2 players or 3 players and everyone puts their coins in the first slot, you have to put your coins in each slot. You get the idea. The story to the game is really simple. It's been 3 months since monsters have taken over the world, and only 3 heroes remain who can defeat the monsters and prevent the end of humanity. There's no talk about where the monsters came from or where the heroes came from. It's just a very bare bones sort of arcade game story, very appropriate to the time period. You'll fight through 7 levels, each one with multiple bosses, including horror staples like Frankenstein's monster, a mummy, a very Dracula-like vampire, and King Zarutz, a cross between the Grim Reaper and a cyborg. That's your final boss here. In the beginning of the game, it really leads you to believe that Dracula is going to be the end boss, but it doesn't work out that way. There are also bonus stages, which are a lot of fun. There's one where you kick zombie heads in the ground, and then there's like a zombie bowling where you throw the zombie into a group of zombies that act as pins. It's just a lot of fun. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Plants vs. Zombies in a way. There are also these chase sequences that are pretty cool that shape the game. There's only 2 of them, but it's cool seeing something different like that in this sort of game to sort of break up that tedious gameplay of the constant mashing of buttons. The controls here, by the way, are super simple. You've got 3 buttons, so kind of a Genesis layout there. You've got 1 to strike, 1 to jump, and 1 for magic. And as with most beat-em-ups, you can do special attacks when dashing. You can press attack and jump together. You'll get a special attack that way as well, which costs a little bit of health. And despite those very simple controls, the characters really do have quite a number of special moves. They have throws, grab moves, a charge move, charging down the attack button, hold that down for a moment, you get a different move. And you can do these jumping dive attacks where it'll drive the enemy into the ground like they're a spike and you're a hammer. And then you can kick them in the head while their head sticks out of the ground. That's a really fun move to do, and it even works on bosses, which is pretty cool. There are 3 characters to choose from. Each one has a unique fighting style, and they all feel different, so you'll get a different experience regarding who you play as. There's Christopher, Europe's most famous vampire hunter. He uses mostly like pro wrestling type moves. He's got a DDT, flying elbow drop. There's Jake, the psychic cyborg. He will suplex his way to victory. He does a German suplex and a few other moves there. And Hong Hua, Asia's most revered martial artist, and she'll lay down some zombie kung fu on any monster that gets in her way. The most, sort of stereotypical fighting style that you'll find in the game here. Night Slashers looks really great. There's large, colorful sprites. The backgrounds have much more detail than you might expect from a game of this era. There's a lot of variety in the stages in the early game, but then later on it all kind of starts to look the same, and I think that's a common problem that these games had in that time period. Also, you're going to see a lot of palette swap enemies, and that gets a little boring as well. Of course, there are lots of enemies on screen at any given time, which means a lot of action. With that powerful 32-bit processor, they really could put a lot of enemies on the screen at a time, which is perfect for this kind of arcade beat-em-up, especially if you're playing with multiple players. The music is pretty much unremarkable here. I walked away from this one and nothing stuck in my head. Usually if you play a game and the music is good, you're going to walk away kind of bopping to one of the tracks. I walked away from this game with no music in my head at all, so kind of unremarkable, not great. There's some voice samples though, which are pretty cool, so I do like the voice samples. They actually sound pretty decent. This game has like 3 different chips in it for sound, apparently. I don't understand what they're all for, and I'm not going to go deep into the technical details of those, but it just seemed like with all that sound, you would get something a little bit better out of it. Of course, in the 90s at the time, we didn't really pay that much attention anyway because the arcades were so loud, so I guess who cares, right? So today, Night Slashers is still available on Steam and also Nintendo Switch. Now, the Steam version has really bad reviews. I haven't played it myself, but I would look out for that. I think the best way to play this one right now, apart from the obvious, would be to go for the Switch version, the Nintendo Switch version. I think that's the best, retail version of the game that is currently available. This would have been a really cool game to see ported out to the consoles back in the day, but it never would have done the arcade version justice. As you can tell here, there's no way we would have gotten that many enemies on screen, or the graphics wouldn't have been that good. It would have been a really weak port for sure. Thank you anyway so much for tuning in, and next time I'm going to be talking about Power Instinct. That was Atlus's answer to the Street Fighter series, and while it looks like just a Street Fighter clone at first, it spawned a series that is a lot better than it has any right to be. I'll have to get deep into it. In the next video, I'll talk all about it. It is remarkably good fighting game franchise that I think a lot of people have slept on. So make sure you subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss a single episode, and leave a comment so I know you're out there. Let me know what's going on. Say hello. Let me know what you think of the videos, if you have any tips, suggestions, or any games that you would like to see me talk about in the future. And until next time, game over.